Thank you very much. So, my name is Hélène Belleuil. I'm coming from France, specifically from Rennes, which is the capital of Brittany, the west part of France. And I'd like to thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to give this conference about opioid-free anesthesia. My disclosure. So if we want to talk about opioid-free anesthesia, first we need to ask ourselves, why do we use opioids during anesthesia? So we all know this triangle that we learned at school, at med school. Hypnosis, analgesia, muscle relaxation are our goals. And to produce to the patient amnesia, hemodynamic stability in analgesia. And to do this, we're using opioids. But we were not always using opioids. Synthetic opioids arrived in the 1960s. They were discovered by this man, Dr. Paul Janssen from Belgium. And when he discovered synthetic opioids, it was a revolution because they allowed reduction of hypnotic agents and the hypnotic agents that we had at the time. They allowed inhibition of the sympathetic system without the cardiovascular collapses. They allowed the limitation of cardiovascular responses to painful stimuli. So all that was allowing hemodynamic stability. So even today, if you go look in all the textbook of anesthesia, you'll see, if you go to the chapter of opioids, you'll see that the first sentence is always the same, as it has always been the same since the 60s. We use opioids for hemodynamic stability, not for analgesia. So that's the first point. The second point is that when you want to start opioid-free anesthesia, that question is going to come at a certain point. But what about analgesia then if we don't use opioids? So the question is, do we feel pain during anesthesia? And we need to go back to some basics. What is pain? What is nociception? There are two different things. Pain is a conscious, unpleasant perception of a noxious stimulus. And nociception is the consequence of the stimulation of these noxious receptors. So when you want to do anti-nociception, you want to suppress the consequences of the stimulation of these receptors. So that is to say that you can have nociception without pain. For example, under GA, you have nociception, but you don't have pain because the patient is not conscious. And to go a little bit further, if you want to interfere with the pathways, the nociception pathways, there are many mediators involved in those pathways. So the only way is not to interfere with enkephalins by using opioids. You can interfere with the nociception pathways with many other ways because there are a lot of neuromediators involved. So all this being said, why do we use opioids for hemodynamic stability and the fundamental difference between pain and nociception under a general anesthesia? Now, how do we do it when you really want to not use opioids during general anesthesia? And I'm not going to talk at all on why should we avoid opioids. I think we all know why we should avoid opioids. So it has to be a multimodal anesthesia. There's no magic drug, magic medication, or there's no magic trick. It's going to have to be like multimodal analgesia for post-op. It's going to be multimodal anesthesia. With a mix of techniques, so regional anesthesia, of course, is the best way to spare morphine, but it's not always possible to do regional anesthesia. You can do, if you don't do regional anesthesia, there's IV lidocaine, we're going to talk about it, NMDA antagonist, ketamine, and for hemodynamic stability, there's different options, different medications that are proposed, magnesium, beta blocker, and alpha-2 agonists. So we're going to talk about all these medications. So lidocaine, its benefits have been proven a long time, mostly on abdominal surgery. Here is one of the meta-analyses, but there are many on the subject, all showing the same benefit, which is a decrease in morphine consumption, decrease of pain, decrease of postoperative nausea and vomiting when you use IV lidocaine during the surgery, intra-op, and sometimes you can use it post-op too. In here, it's showing it mostly during open abdominal surgery and laparoscopic surgery, but as you can see in here, other surgeries, it was not significant. Although there are studies in complex spine surgery. So we're going to talk a little bit more about neurosurgery. First, the spine surgery. So in here, spine surgery, there are 3 interesting studies on IV lidocaine in spine surgery. This is the first one, published in 2013, 160 patients who received IV lidocaine intra-op and in PACU. We don't know if the patient received opioids during the surgery. It's not clearly stated in the article, so we don't know if it was opioid-free anesthesia or not. Anyway, they received esmolol in case of tachycardia during the surgery. And post-op analgesia, for post-op analgesia, patients were given only morphine, which is not exactly today's standards on post-op analgesia. It's mostly multimodal and not only morphine. As you see the results in red, you have the patient who received lidocaine, and they seem to have, there's a tendency towards less pain after surgery, less pain with less morphine needed, using less morphine. Seemed to be a benefit. Second study for which the results seem a little too good to be true, because there's only 40 patients in spine surgery receiving IV lidocaine again during the surgery. And post-op, they had something closer to multimodal. They had fentanyl and then NSAIDs, morphine, and acetaminophen. Results, as I say, are pretty amazing. They went from 19 milligram per day of morphine to 4 milligram a day. And look at these results are very interesting. They looked at the pain score after surgery, but also long-term. As you can see in the lidocaine group, patients were less painful, including 1 month, 2 months, and 3 months after the surgery. Patients were experiencing less pain when they received IV lidocaine during the surgery. But there is also a negative study. This one published almost at the same time, 2017. It's hard to find flaws in that study. It's a very well-designed randomized control study, placebo-controlled. Patients received IV lidocaine with remifentanil, and in post-op they had acetaminophen and morphine, and they couldn't find any difference between the 2 groups. No difference in pain, PUNV, length of stay. So these are the 3 main studies, well done in terms of method, about spine surgery and IV lidocaine. So I guess more studies are needed to definitely recommend it. Ketamine. Ketamine for postoperative analgesia and ketamine use during surgery, its benefits have been shown. It's been a long time too. Here is one of the many meta-analyses you can find on the subject, showing that giving IV ketamine during the surgery allows morphine sparing, reduction of pain score, reduction of nausea and vomiting. It's really efficient on big surgeries that are long and known to be painful, so abdominal, thoracic, and spine surgery specifically. The side effects, we all know them, it's hallucinations or nightmares. And of course, we're talking low dose ketamine. We're not talking the doses you use for anesthesia. It's anti-hyperalgesia doses. What about spine surgery? There are some studies, and specifically this one, showing the benefit of ketamine during spine surgery. And in this study, its specific patient is the one with chronic back pain, chronically treated with opioids before the surgery. So they're coming to surgery, a painful surgery that can create hyperalgesia, but they are already at risk of using more opioids because they are chronically treated with opioids. This study was very interesting. So they compare ketamine with placebo during spine surgery. And as you can see, the patient who had ketamine during the surgery needed less morphine 24 hours and 48 hours after the surgery. And to go further, even 6 weeks after the surgery, patients who received ketamine during the spine surgery, so 6 weeks before, were using a lot less morphine. So they were able to decrease the quantity of morphine they used before the surgery. So probably ketamine, certainly interesting in this type of patients. So now we're going to talk about the hemodynamic stability. So we said we could use opioids, but the topic of this conference is to not use opioids. So we're going to talk about beta blockers, magnesium sulfate, and alpha-2 agonists. Beta blockers. So beta blockers, I'm going to present to you some of the literature, but I'd like to tell you right now that I've never been using beta blockers during surgery, so I have no experience of it. I'll tell you later, I'm using alpha-2 agonist. So I'm presenting you the literature, but if you ask me about my experience, I have none. So there are many studies showing that beta blockers could be interesting for hemodynamic stability when you don't use opioids during a surgery. And here, it's not neurosurgery, it's cholecystectomy. 3 groups, patient receiving control, which was fentanyl, or esmolol, or remifentanil during the surgery. And you can see post-op, patient in that group used less fentanyl, so less opioids. They had a lot less nausea in the recovery room, and they spend less time in the PACU. So there seems to be a benefit. And there's been a meta-analysis on the subject, this one, published in 2017, showing the benefit of intraoperative esmolol with 23 studies. So when you use beta blocker during surgery, you decrease the intraoperative opioids significantly. And you also decrease the post-operative opioids. Why is that? It's because, as it was said before, by the speaker before, when you use less opioid during the surgery, then you're going to need less opioids after the surgery. Magnesium. Magnesium sulfate, so the literature is pretty scarce on the subject, but there is a meta-analysis, so it's among all surgeries, it's not specific to any kind of surgeries, and it's including studies that are starting to be a little old. But anyway, they showed in that meta-analysis that when patients are given magnesium during the surgery, then in post-op, the morphine consumption is significantly decreased it's an interesting number. But more interestingly, there is this showing that using magnesium during the surgery can help with hemodynamic stability. In here, they included only 6 studies on the subject. And if you look at heart rate, they showed that you have a better stability of the heart rate during surgery when you use magnesium intra-op. They didn't show that for blood pressure, but they showed it for heart rate, which is an interesting concept. So alpha-2 agonists, as you know, there are 2, clonidine and dexmedetomidine. I'm going to mostly focus on dex because it's highly selective for alpha-2 agonists, much more selective than clonidine. And the pharmacokinetics, to me, are more interesting for what we want for intra-op, because the distribution is much more rapid. It's 6 minutes versus 20 minutes for clonidine. And the elimination half-time is only 2 hours, whereas for clonidine is an average of 15 hours. So for the use that I'm proposing right now, I think dexmedetomidine is much more interesting than clonidine, even though a lot of people around the world are doing opioid-free anesthesia with clonidine. So I'm not saying you shouldn't use clonidine. Both medications are metabolized by the liver into an inactive component. And the pharmacodynamics, well, there's the effect on the central nervous system, which are the effect that we want, hypnosis, sedation, analgesia, and the effect on the cardiovascular system with a possible initial and temporary elevation of the blood pressure. And then you see most of the time, not all the time, a decrease in blood pressure and a risk of bradycardia, so low heart rate. So what are the results? What is it when you do opioid-free anesthesia? So one of the first study is in bariatric surgery. Most of the study actually so far are in bariatric surgery because we can all understand the benefit of not giving opioids to obese patients. So this is one of the first. Patients were receiving the same exact medication for a GA, except they had fentanyl in one group and dex in the other group. In here you have the mean blood pressure and the heart rate, which were lower in the dex group. And bispectral and dex were not different between the two groups. And desflurane concentration, so you needing a little less desflurane in the dex group, but that's not very interesting. It's not very meaningful. What's meaningful is this: for the same duration of surgery, patients in PACU, you see, were a lot less painful when they received dex, so no opioids, and that with a lot less morphine, less than half. They needed less than half the morphine in PACU. They were less painful using less opioids. That was associated with a lower blood pressure and a lower heart rate, even if we staying in ranges that are acceptable. A second study, I'm going to present you 3 studies in bariatric surgery, the 3 studies that I think are the most interesting. This one is interesting because this one is clinically meaningful. Just showing that you reduce opioid consumption in post-op doesn't really mean anything for a patient. You need to have a reduction of opioid that is meaningful, meaning it's associated with clinical benefit for the patient. And this study, they showed that it's associated with a reduction, an important reduction of nausea and vomiting. So they compared 2 groups who had GA that associated all the things you can do to make patient vomit, okay, opioids and halogen, everything, compared to this protocol using propofol, ketamine, and dex. And Apfel score was similar in both groups, and they had a reduction of PUNV by 17%. And they also had a reduction of severity of PUNV. So a very clinically meaningful benefit effect of not using opioids. Last study on bariatric surgery is a study coming from Belgium, because you know in Belgium they invented the opioids, but they're also the one who have been doing opioid-free anesthesia for a very long time. It's been 15 years that they're using this technique in some hospitals in Belgium. So they have a long experience of this. So in here is bariatric surgery, 50 patients. It's a randomized controlled trial comparing opioid anesthesia versus opioid-free anesthesia. So in the opioid-free group, a patient has dexmedetomidine, lidocaine, ketamine. And the primary outcome was the Q40 score, which is a score of postoperative pain and discomfort. And they showed that patients were more comfortable in the opioid-free group, but also look at the other outcomes. Patient had less desaturation, less PUNV, less pain, and using less morphine in PACU. To finish I know you're going to ask me questions because I always got those questions about heart rate and blood pressure. I just want to show you this study. It's cholecystectomy, it's not neurosurgery, but it's 2 groups, opioid-free anesthesia versus anesthesia based on opioids. They show benefits that, as I just showed you, less morphine post-op, less pain. But I'm showing this to you because when you compare remifentanil and dex, and you see that the low heart rate and the low blood pressure sometimes is not in the group you think. In this time, it was in the remifentanil group. Okay, so we're not afraid of bradycardia when it's patient under remifentanil because we're used to it. So as you can see in here, sometimes you have more bradycardia with remifentanil than with dex. There's been meta-analysis on the subject, but be careful with those meta-analyses. They mix studies where dex is used intra-op or only post-op. There's also a mix of studies that patients are given opioids, so it's not opioid-free, but it's opioids plus dex. Anyways, these studies were showing that you have a morphine sparing. Interesting. It's 3 times, you save 3 times more morphine with dex than with clonidine, and you can see you have less postoperative nausea and vomiting. A more recent meta-analysis on the opioid-free anesthesia, very recent. One more time, be careful with this meta-analysis. It's a mix of all kinds of studies. Some are very old, and some are not exactly opioid-free because patients received some opioids. Anyway, they showed that when you compare with remifentanil, patients were less painful post-op. It's not true with other opioids. So now to neurosurgery. I have 5 minutes, I'm going to finish. Neurosurgery. There have been studies on spinal. When you use dexmedetomidine versus remifentanil, this study published in 2015, 40 patients, they had the exact same medication except they had dex in one group, remifentanil in the other group. In here you have the pain level. You can see that patients receiving dex were less painful all the time after surgery. And what is more interesting is that if you use the rescue analgesics, they barely use rescue analgesics. And postoperative nausea and vomiting, there was almost none in the group with dexmedetomidine compared to the group with remifentanil. So a benefit of dexmedetomidine. Another study in spine surgery, this one is methodology, the methodology of this one is not as good, it's retrospective in only a very small group, 36 patients, but anyway, they showed, you see, patients who had opioid-free anesthesia used basically the same amount of morphine in PACU, but altogether, the total morphine consumption in the post-op was a lot less than the group that received an opioid-based anesthesia. Another one I'm presenting you, this one is not exactly opioid-free anesthesia because patients had fentanyl in the 3 groups, but they're comparing, they had a control group, a group with dexmedetomidine, and a group with magnesium sulfate. And the outcome was the hemodynamic stability during spine surgery. And what they show is that you have, in here you have heart rate, this graph is blood pressure, you have a better hemodynamic stability with dexmedetomidine compared with magnesium sulfate or control. But it was at the expense that in the magnesium group, you had a delayed extubation time, delayed response to verbal command, and delayed orientation. The orientation time was longer. So that was not for the benefits of magnesium. There's been meta-analysis, even if there's really few studies on dexmedetomidine used in spine surgery. There's only 9 studies in that meta-analysis. And if you look deeper into those studies, there's only one actually comparing dex with an opioid, because 2 studies in there were actually using dexmedetomidine post-op only. 6 studies were using opioid in both groups, so it's not exactly what we're talking about here. But their conclusion was intraoperative and postoperative opioid sparing is allowed when you use dex, and you can also have an intraoperative propofol sparing. Craniotomy. There's few studies on craniotomy. This one is the best one in terms of methodology. 80 patient dex compared with remifentanil. The outcome was the hemodynamic stability and recovery. So in here you have the heart rates. You can see that they're basically the same, sometimes a little lower with remifentanil. Extubation times and recovery, on the other hand, was much longer with dex, Extubation time, eye-opening time, verbal command was longer with dex. And if you look into the literature, there are 3 similar studies to this one. All are small RCTs, and they all show that the recovery is faster with remifentanil during craniotomy. But the time to first analgesic demand is longer with dex, and the hemodynamic stability is basically similar. There's meta-analysis, believe it or not, on this, even if there's really few studies. And one more time, if you look into details, there's 22 studies, but among these 22 studies, 14 trials compared dex with placebo, and so there were opioids in both groups. So one more time, it's adding dex to opioids, but it's not replacing. And in here, they showed that you have less pain and less postoperative nausea and vomiting. And in that meta-analysis, there's only 8 trials really comparing dex to an active comparator, and 3 studies comparing OFA versus opioid-based anesthesia, showing no benefit. Quickly, other use of dexmedetomidine in neurosurgery. Awake craniotomy, there's 3 retrospective studies showing that you use fewer opioids, fewer vasoactive drugs, and one showing the interest in the benefit of dexmedetomidine used when you do a scalp block to control post-craniotomy pain. It's an RCT, and it showed that you have a longer pain-free period with fewer analgesics. To finish, I'm right on time, is opioid-free anesthesia the anesthesia of the future? I don't know, because there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered. First, we need to clarify the safety of using DEX. How? Because all the monitoring we have for hypnosis and analgesia are not valid when you use alpha-2 agonist. The proof, the evidence is, as I showed you, there's a decrease in opioid side effects, but there's no studies in a fast-track rehabilitation program. Of course, we can hypothesize that there will be a reduction of hyperalgesia and pain chronicization, but it's never been shown. Is it for all patients or some patients? We can think, of course, of obese, respiratory insufficiency patient using opioids chronically. All these answers, we don't have all these answers. And specifically for neurosurgery, in spine, there's some benefits that have been proven when more studies are needed. In craniotomy, frankly, we need more studies because so far nothing is really convincing. Thank you.